The night was alive with the chirping of crickets, a familiar lullaby in the village of Otobi, Plateau State. Families slept soundly in their homes, unaware of the horror that was about to descend upon them. It was March 2025, and the peace of the night was shattered by gunfire. Dozens of armed men, speaking the Fulfulde language, stormed into the village, their faces contorted with rage. They were Fulani herdsmen, and well, they had come to unleash terror. Esther, a young mother, woke to the sound of screams. Her heart pounded in her chest as she grabbed her two children, their eyes wide with fear. Her husband John rushed to grab his hunting rifle, a meager defense against the onslaught. The attackers moved with ruthless efficiency, their torches illuminating the terrified faces of villagers. Gunshots rang out, piercing the night, each one a death knell for another victim. Esther and her family fled into the surrounding bush, the screams of their neighbors echoing in their ears. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs ached, the image of their burning village seared into their minds. That night, Otobi became another statistic, another village ravaged by the violence that had gripped Nigeria. 3 lay dead, dozens were missing, presumed kidnapped. Esther and her family, like so many others, were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the haunting memories of that night. The attack on Otobi was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of violence perpetrated by armed Fulani herdsmen against farming communities across Nigeria's Middle Belt. The violence plaguing Nigeria's Middle Belt is often framed as a conflict between farmers and herders, a clash of cultures over dwindling resources. But the reality is far more insidious. It is a campaign of terror, systematic and brutal, targeting innocent civilians. The human cost of this conflict is staggering. Thousands have been killed, their lives cut short by bullets and machetes. Villages lie in ruins, homes reduced to ashes and rubble. The United Nations estimates that over 30,000 people have been displaced in Plateau State alone in recent years. These are not just numbers. They are mothers, fathers, children, and babies torn from their homes and thrust into uncertainty. They live in overcrowded displacement camps, haunted by trauma and loss, their futures uncertain. The psychological scars of this violence run deep. Children who have witnessed unspeakable horrors bear the invisible wounds of war. Women, often the targets of sexual violence, carry the weight of their trauma in silence. The world cannot afford to ignore the plight of these forgotten victims. Their stories must be told, their voices amplified. Plateau State, once known for its temperate climate and breathtaking scenery, has become synonymous with violence. The state has been a hotbed of Fulani herdsmen attacks, with entire communities decimated. In April 2025, a wave of attacks on villages across Plateau State left at least 48 people dead, most of them women and children. The attackers, armed with sophisticated weaponry, descended on the villages in the dead of night, shooting indiscriminately. Survivors recounted harrowing tales of fleeing for their lives, their ears filled with the screams of their loved ones. Mass burials have become a grim reality in Plateau State, a testament to the scale of the carnage. The attacks in Plateau are not random acts of violence. They are coordinated and strategic, aimed at driving farming communities off their ancestral lands. The attackers often operate with impunity, melting back into the bush after their reign of terror, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction. The Nigerian government has deployed security forces to the region, but their presence has done little to deter the attackers or bring the perpetrators to justice. The constant threat of violence has created a climate of fear that permeates every aspect of life in affected communities. Farmers are too afraid to tend their fields, their livelihoods destroyed. Children are too terrified to attend school, their education disrupted. The social fabric of these communities is being torn apart, replaced by suspicion, fear, and a sense of hopelessness. The trauma is intergenerational, passed down from parents to children, casting a long shadow over their future. The psychological toll of living under constant threat is immeasurable. Many suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. The lack of adequate healthcare services in these regions exacerbates their suffering. the international community must recognize the gravity of this crisis and provide the necessary humanitarian assistance to support these communities. The world cannot stand idly by while innocent people are being terrorized. The victims of this conflict are not just statistics, they are real people with names, families, and dreams. People like Mary, a young mother from Plateau State, who witnessed her husband being hacked to death by Fulani herdsmen. She and her 3 young children were forced to flee their home. Their lives, irrevocably changed. Or John, a farmer from Plateau State, who lost everything he owned in an attack. His farm, his livelihood, his home, all reduced to ashes. These are the faces of the conflict, the human stories that often get lost in the headlines. Their stories are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a stark reminder of the devastating impact of this violence. The root causes of the conflict are honestly complex and multifaceted, but there are several key factors that contribute to the ongoing violence. Competition over land and resources, which is made worse by climate change, is a major driver. As desertification pushes herders further south in search of grazing land, they are, increasingly coming into conflict with farming communities. Religious tensions also play a role, since the majority of Fulani herdsmen are Muslim, while many farming communities in the Middle Belt are Christian. This religious dimension adds yet another layer of complexity to the conflict, fueling mistrust and animosity. Some analysts argue that the violence is part of a broader agenda of land grabbing and expansionism, with the ultimate goal of displacing Christian communities and establishing Fulani dominance in the Middle Belt. The lack of transparency and accountability from the Nigerian government has really fueled these suspicions. Addressing the root causes of the conflict is, without a doubt, crucial to finding a lasting solution. The Nigerian government has been, widely criticized for its inadequate response to the crisis. Critics accuse the government of turning a blind eye to the violence and even of complicity with the perpetrators. The lack of effective law enforcement and the failure to bring perpetrators to justice has created a culture of impunity, honestly emboldening the attackers. The government argues that it is doing everything it can to address the situation, but many affected communities feel abandoned and betrayed. The international community has a responsibility to hold the Nigerian government accountable and to demand an end to the violence. Targeted sanctions against individuals and entities complicit in the violence, as well as support for civil society organizations working to promote peace and reconciliation, are crucial steps. The time for action is now. The violence in Nigeria's Middle Belt is, frankly, a stain on the conscience of humanity. Yet, it remains a largely forgotten crisis, overshadowed by other conflicts and crises around the world. The international media has been criticized for its inadequate coverage of the conflict, failing to give it the attention it deserves. This lack of attention has allowed the violence to continue unabated, with little international pressure on the Nigerian government to act. It is time for the world to wake up to the horrors unfolding in Nigeria's Middle Belt. We cannot allow these atrocities to continue in the shadows. We must shine a light on this crisis and demand justice for the victims. Silence is not an option. The violence in Nigeria's Middle Belt is a complex and multifaceted problem, with honestly, no easy solutions. However, there are concrete steps that can be taken to address the crisis and bring an end to the suffering. The Nigerian government must take immediate action to disarm and prosecute the perpetrators of violence, regardless of their ethnicity or religion. Security forces must be provided with the resources and training they need to protect vulnerable communities. The international community must provide humanitarian assistance to those affected by the conflict, including food, shelter, and medical care. We must also support civil society organizations working to promote peace and reconciliation. Above all, we must amplify the voices of the victims and demand justice for the crimes committed against them. The world cannot afford to remain silent in the face of such barbarity. We must act now to end the violence, heal the wounds, and build a future of peace and prosperity for all Nigerians.